Adrian Cole came home unannounced. Nobody knew he was back. The mansion stood silent, like it had been for 14 months. But then he heard something. Sounds, coming from somewhere deep inside. His heart started pounding. He didn't know what it was. He moved toward it, following the impossible noise, his breath catching in his throat. It was coming from the kitchen. He pushed open the door, and what he saw stopped his entire world. Adrian Cole was a billionaire. Tech empire. Self-made. He built Cole Tech Industries from a college dorm room into a global powerhouse worth $4 billion. Artificial intelligence, cloud computing, digital infrastructure that ran half the Fortune 500. Everything he touched turned revolutionary. But money couldn't bring back what he'd lost. His wife, Lena, died from a rare autoimmune crisis. It came suddenly, aggressively, like her body declared war on itself. The doctor said there was nothing they could have done. She was gone in 72 hours. Adrian was in Berlin, launching a new data center when he got the call. At her funeral, something shattered inside his 3 daughters, Aria, Belle, and Nova. 5 years old, identical triplets, golden curls, eyes like their mothers. They stopped speaking. All 3. At the same time. Aria used to pray before every meal in her small, earnest voice. Belle asked questions about everything, especially heaven. Nova hummed songs she'd learned in Sunday school, off-key but joyful. Now, nothing. Silence. 14 months of unbearable silence. No words, no laughter, no bedtime prayers. Just 3 little girls holding each other's hands at night, staring at walls like they were waiting for someone who would never come home. Like small ghosts haunting their own lives. Adrian spent millions trying to reach them. Top child psychologists from Boston, grief specialists from Switzerland, trauma therapists who'd worked with war refugees. He took them to Hawaii, to horse ranches in Montana, to a chateau in France. He bought them every toy imaginable. Hired music teachers, art therapists, even a children's pastor who came twice a week. Nothing worked. The girls stayed locked inside themselves, silent together, like they'd made a covenant with their pain that nobody could break. So Adrian did what broken men do. He ran. He drowned himself in work, 18-hour days, board meetings that stretched past midnight, acquisitions in Tokyo, expansions in London, conferences in Dubai. Because sitting in that house felt like being buried alive. His estate in Greenwich had 9 bedrooms, a home theater, an indoor pool, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Long Island Sound. But it was the most suffocating place on earth. Every corner reminded him of Lena. Every silence screamed that he'd failed his daughters. One morning, Margaret, the head housekeeper who'd been with the family since before the girls were born, came to his office. "Mr. Cole, I need to speak with you. The house is too much for me now. The girls, they need more care than I can give them alone. I'd like to bring in some additional help." Adrian barely looked up from his laptop. "Do whatever you think is best, Margaret." He signed the approval without reading it. 3 days later, Soraya Hale walked through the front door. 32 years old, from a small Pentecostal church in Bridgeport, studying theology part-time while working to support herself. She'd spent years volunteering in children's ministry before her own life fell apart. She understood grief in a language most people never learn. She knew what it felt like to keep your heart beating when everything inside you wanted to stop. Adrian saw Soraya once in passing. She was carrying fresh linens up the stairs, her hair pulled back, wearing a simple dress. She nodded respectfully. He didn't acknowledge her, but his daughters noticed. Saria didn't try to fix them. She didn't force smiles or beg them to talk. She just showed up every single morning, folding their clothes, tidying their playroom, humming old hymns under her breath, being present. And slowly, impossibly, the girls started inching closer. In the first week, Aria stood in the doorway while Soraya made the beds, just watching. Then Belle, then Nova. In the second week, Soraya sang softly while organizing toys. Nova crept into the room, sitting cross-legged on the floor, listening. In the third week, Belle left a drawing on Soraya's cleaning cart. A rainbow with 3 stick figures underneath. Soraya picked it up like it was sacred. She pressed it to her heart and whispered, "This is so beautiful, sweet girl. Thank you." And Belle's eyes, empty for so long, flickered with something. Just a spark. But it was there. Week after week, something was shifting. Something quiet, something holy, something Adrian never witnessed because he was never home. The girls started whispering to Soraya while she folded laundry, then speaking in full sentences, then giggling while she wiped down counters. By 6 weeks, they were singing again. Old worship songs Lena used to sing. Soraya didn't announce it. She didn't report progress or ask for recognition. She just loved them steadily, patiently, like tending a garden in winter and trusting God to bring the spring. Adrian had no idea his daughters were coming back to life. He was in Singapore, negotiating a $600 million server contract. Exhausted, worn thin, surviving on coffee and conference calls. He wasn't supposed to come home for 4 more days. But something inside him said go. Not a voice, just a pull, a knowing he couldn't explain. He didn't call ahead. He didn't tell Margaret. He just canceled his meetings, booked the next flight, and left. When he walked through the front door at 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, the house was quiet. Like always. He expected nothing different. But then he heard something. Sounds. His chest tightened. He stood frozen in the marble entryway, briefcase still in his hand, listening. It couldn't be. The mansion had been silent for 14 months, a tomb of memories and unanswered prayers. But the sounds were real. Laughter. Children's laughter. High and bright and unmistakable. Adrian's hands started trembling. His heart slammed against his ribs. He didn't understand. He moved toward the sound, down the hallway, faster now, his polished shoes echoing on the hardwood, his throat closed up. The laughter grew louder. It was coming from the kitchen. The kitchen where Lena used to bake with the girls every Saturday morning, where she taught them to crack eggs and measure flour and pray over the food before it went in the oven. He reached the door. His hand shook as he gripped the handle. Through the crack, he could hear singing now. A voice he didn't recognize. Gentle, warm, lifting up an old hymn. And his daughters' voices, giggling, talking, alive. He pushed the door open slowly. And what he saw inside didn't just stop his world. It shattered every defense he'd built around his broken heart. But before we continue, hit that subscribe button and click like, because this story will show you that sometimes God sends help in the form of a stranger, that miracles happen when we've stopped looking for them, and that the greatest healings often begin in the quietest, most unexpected moments. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Now let me take you back. Back to the day it all began. Back to when Adrian Cole still believed in miracles. Before grief taught him that some things can't be fixed with power or money or control. Back to the moment his world stopped turning. Adrian stood in the doorway of the kitchen, and for 3 full seconds he couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what his eyes were showing him. The afternoon sun poured through the bay windows like liquid gold, flooding the room with light so bright it felt supernatural. And in the center of that light were his daughters, his girls. Aria and Belle sat on the marble countertop, their legs dangling, their feet bare, wearing matching purple dresses he'd never seen before. Dresses with little white flowers embroidered on the collars. Their golden curls caught the sunlight. Their faces, those faces that had been blank and hollow for 14 months, were glowing, smiling, alive. And Nova, his smallest, his baby, sat perched on the shoulders of a woman he barely recognized. The maid. Soraya. Nova's tiny hands rested on top of Soraya's head, fingers tangled in her dark hair, and she was giggling. Actually, giggling. The sound pierced through Adrian's chest like something sharp and sacred. Soraya stood at the kitchen island, a dish towel in one hand, humming. No, not humming. Singing. Her voice was soft, clear, lifting an old hymn into the sunlit air. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Arya turned her head and saw him first. Her green eyes went wide. Daddy? Her voice was small, uncertain, but it was there. It existed. Adrian's knees almost gave out. Belle looked over too, her smile fading just slightly. You're home early. 4 words. 4 words from a child who hadn't spoken in over a year. Soraya stopped mid-song. She turned slowly, still holding Nova on her shoulders, and her expression shifted. Not fear, something gentler. Compassion, maybe. She carefully lifted Nova down and set her on the floor. Mr. Cole, she said quietly. We didn't expect you. Adrian's throat felt like it was closing. He stared at his daughters, at their faces full of light, at the joy that had been stolen from them and was somehow, impossibly, back. And then the feeling hit him. Not gratitude, not relief, something darker. Something that coiled in his stomach and tightened around his lungs. Jealousy. She did this. This stranger, this woman he'd never even looked at twice, had walked into his home and brought his daughters back to life, while he was halfway around the world closing deals that didn't matter. While he was running, while he was hiding, she had done what he couldn't do. Belle slid off the counter and walked towards Soraya, taking her hand. Miss Soraya says God still loves us, Daddy. Even though Mommy's in heaven, she says Mommy's not sad anymore. Adrian's chest caved in. His vision blurred. That should have been him. He should have been the one to tell them that. He should have been the one holding them, praying with them, singing to them. But he hadn't. He'd abandoned them. And this woman, this stranger, had stepped into the empty space he'd left behind and filled it with something he didn't even know he'd lost. His faith, his presence, his love. The jealousy twisted into something sharper. Rage. What is this? His voice came out harsh, louder than he intended. The girls flinched. Soraya's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't move. Mr. Cole, please, let me explain. Explain what? Adrian's hands were shaking now. Explain why my daughters are dressed in clothes I didn't buy? Explain why they're talking to you and not to me? Explain why you're here playing mother when you're supposed to be cleaning? The words were cruel. He knew it even as they left his mouth. But he couldn't stop. The pain was too big. The shame was suffocating him. Arya's smile disappeared. Belle stepped back from Soraya, her little hand dropping away. Nova's eyes filled with tears. Soraya held up her hands gently, her voice calm. Mr. Cole, please. Don't let grief speak for you. Your daughters love you. They've been waiting for you. I'm not trying to replace anyone. I'm just trying to help. Help? Adrian's voice cracked. You think this is helping? Coming into my house, into my life? Making my children depend on you? His breath was ragged now. You're fired. Pack your things and leave. Today, the room went completely silent. Soraya's face didn't change. She didn't argue. Didn't cry. She just nodded slowly, her eyes soft and sad. I understand, she whispered. Then she looked down at the girls, kneeling so she was at their level. I have to go now, sweet ones. But remember what we talked about, okay? God is always with you. Always. Belle's lip trembled. No, don't go. Arya grabbed Soraya's sleeve. Please, Miss Soraya. Nova started crying, silent tears streaming down her cheeks. Soraya kissed each of their foreheads, her own eyes wet now. I was led here, she said quietly, looking up at Adrian one last time. I didn't choose this on my own. I was sent. I hope one day you'll understand that. She stood, walked past Adrian without another word, and disappeared down the hallway. The front door opened, then closed, and the moment it did, something broke. The light in the kitchen seemed to dim even though the sun hadn't moved. The girls stood frozen, staring at the spot where Soraya had been. Their faces emptied, the glow drained out of their eyes like someone had flipped a switch. Belle's shoulders slumped. Arya's hands fell to her sides. Nova turned away from Adrian and pressed her face into the cabinet, her small body shaking with silent sobs. Adrian's heart stopped. No. No. Not again. Girls. But they wouldn't look at him, wouldn't move toward him. They just stood there, hollow and distant, exactly like they'd been the night Lena died. The night they watched her casket lowered into the ground and something inside them shut off. He'd done it. He'd taken the one person who'd reached them and thrown her out. And now they were gone again, slipping back into that unreachable place. And this time, it was his fault. He opened his mouth to call them, to apologize, to fix it. But nothing came out. And in the silence, Adrian felt something he hadn't felt in 14 months. Something heavier than grief, heavier than loss. He felt the weight of God's presence leaving the room. Not Soraya's absence. Something bigger. Something eternal. It was as if the air itself had been holding grace, holding hope, holding a second chance, and he'd just slammed the door on all of it. Adrian sank to his knees on the kitchen floor, surrounded by sunlight that suddenly felt cold, staring at his daughters, who couldn't even see him anymore. And for the first time since Lena died, Adrian Cole realized he wasn't just a man who'd lost his wife. He was a man who'd lost his way, and he didn't know if he could ever find it again. Adrian didn't leave the kitchen for an hour. He sat on the floor with his back against the cabinet, watching his daughters retreat upstairs without a word, without a glance back, without anything. Margaret tried to approach him twice, but he waved her away. When he finally stood, his legs felt weak, his chest hollow. He walked to his office, closed the door, and sat in the leather chair that had cost more than most people's cars. And then he broke. The scene replayed in his mind on a loop. The sunlight, the purple dresses, Nova on Soraya's shoulders, Belle saying God still loves us, the joy in their faces, the life. And then his voice, sharp and cruel, ripping it all away. He covered his face with his hands and sobbed. Deep, guttural sobs that shook his whole body. He didn't fire a maid. He sent away the only person God sent to help his children. The thought hit him like a physical blow, and he doubled over in the chair, gasping for air. He stayed in that office until the sky turned dark. At some point, Margaret knocked softly and left a tray of food outside the door. He didn't touch it. Around midnight, he finally climbed the stairs to check on the girls. Their bedroom door was cracked open. He pushed it gently and saw them curled together in Arya's bed, the way they always slept now, holding each other like they were afraid to let go. Their faces were streaked with dried tears. Adrian's throat tightened. He stepped closer, and his foot bumped something on the floor, a small notebook, pink with a unicorn on the cover. He picked it up and carried it back to the hallway, turning on the light. The first page was dated 6 weeks ago. Arya's handwriting, shaky and uneven. Dear God, Miss Soraya came today. She sang to us. I almost smiled. Is that okay? Adrian's hands trembled as he turned the page. God, please let Miss Soraya stay. She doesn't make us talk. She just loves us, like Mommy did. Another page. Belle's handwriting this time. Messier. The letters running together. God, Miss Soraya says, you still love us, even though Mommy's gone. Is that true? I want to believe her. And then Nova's, the simplest of all, just a sentence repeated over and over. God, please send Miss Soraya again. God, please send Miss Soraya again. The final entry was from yesterday. God, heal Daddy's heart. He's so sad. We don't know how to help him. But maybe you do. Adrian closed the notebook and slid down the wall, sitting in the dim hallway, tears streaming down his face. They'd been praying for him. While he was gone. While he was running. While he was drowning in his own grief, his daughters were on their knees, asking God to heal him. And he'd destroyed the one answer to their prayers. He couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m, he heard whispers coming from the girls' room. He moved closer, pressing his ear to the door. "Are you awake?" Belle's voice, small and broken. "Yes," Arya whispered back. "Me too," Nova said. There was a pause. Then Arya spoke again. "Should we pray?" "For what?" Belle asked. "For Miss Soraya. To come back." Adrian heard rustling, the sound of them sitting up. Probably holding hands, the way Lena used to teach them. And then, in unison, their tiny voices lifted in the darkness. "God, please bring her back. Please. We need her. Daddy needs her too. Even if he doesn't know it. Please. God. Amen." Adrian's legs gave out. He slid to the floor outside their door, pressing his fist against his mouth to keep from sobbing out loud. He'd failed them. Not just today. Every day since Lena died. He'd been so consumed by his own pain that he couldn't see theirs. And when someone finally reached them, when God finally sent help, Adrian's pride and jealousy sent her away. He stayed there until dawn, listening to his daughter's breathing on the other side of the door, knowing he had to fix this, knowing he didn't deserve to, but he had to try. By 7 a.m, he was in his car. Margaret had given him Soraya's address when he asked, her face full of quiet disappointment. The drive took 40 minutes, from Greenwich's sprawling estates to a modest neighborhood in Bridgeport. Small houses with chain-link fences, cracked sidewalks, cars that had seen better years. The contrast hit Adrian hard. She'd been traveling this distance every day, living in this world and stepping into his. And he'd never even asked her where she was from. He parked in front of a narrow 2-story house with peeling blue paint and a small porch. His hands were shaking as he walked up the steps. He knocked. Once, twice. The door opened. Soraya stood there in jeans and a simple gray sweater, her hair down around her shoulders. Her eyes weren't angry. They were just sad. Calm and sad. Like she'd already forgiven him before he arrived. "Mr. Cole," she said quietly. Adrian's carefully rehearsed words evaporated. He opened his mouth, and nothing came out. And then his knees buckled. And he sank down right there on her porch, his hands gripping the railing to keep from collapsing completely. "I destroyed the only light my children had left," he choked out. "I sent away the only person who could reach them. Please. Please forgive me. I don't deserve it. I know I don't. But my daughters, they need you. And I was so wrong. So blind. Please." Soraya knelt down slowly, meeting him at eye level. She didn't speak right away. She just looked at him with those steady, compassionate eyes. Finally, she said, "I'm not angry at you, Mr. Cole. I never was." "You should be," Adrian said, his voice raw. "I was cruel. I was selfish." "You were hurt," Soraya replied gently. "And hurt people sometimes hurt others. I understand that." She stood and gestured for him to come inside. The living room was small, neat, filled with second-hand furniture and a bookshelf lined with theology texts and children's Bibles. She sat on the couch and motioned for him to sit across from her. "I didn't come to your home by accident," she said. "I was praying one night, asking God where he wanted me, and I felt led to apply for that position. I didn't know why. I just trusted it." Adrian leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "The girls, they were talking, laughing. I haven't seen them like that since Lena died. How did you do it?" Soraya shook her head. I didn't do anything, Mr. Cole. God did. Your daughters' hearts were spiritually suffocating. They needed someone to sit with them in their pain, without trying to fix it, to love them without expecting anything in return. That's all I did. That's everything, Adrian whispered. Soraya's expression softened. Your daughters don't need a maid, Mr. Cole. They need a father with a healed spirit. They need you. Present. Open. Willing to feel again, even when it hurts. Adrian looked down at his hands. I don't know if I can. I've been running for so long. I don't know how to stop. Then learn, Soraya said simply. Reopen your heart to God. Commit to being there, emotionally, not just physically. Stop hiding behind your work and your grief. She paused, her gaze steady. I'll come back. But only if you do the work too. Only if you heal alongside them. Adrian's throat tightened. How long? Soraya stood and walked to the door, opening it gently. 1 week, Mr. Cole. Spend 1 week being present with your daughters. Pray with them. Sit with them. Let yourself feel. And then we'll talk. Adrian nodded, unable to speak. He walked to the door, then turned back. Thank you. Soraya smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her. Go home, Mr. Cole. Your daughters are waiting. Adrian drove home in silence, Soraya's words echoing in his mind. 1 week. Be present. Heal. He'd built a $4 billion empire, negotiated deals with heads of state, revolutionized entire industries. But being present with his own daughters, sitting in his own grief, felt more terrifying than any boardroom he'd ever walked into. That night, he couldn't sleep. He paced his bedroom until 3 a.m, then finally opened the drawer in his nightstand. Lena's Bible. He hadn't touched it since the funeral. The leather cover was soft, worn from years of her morning readings. He opened it, and a bulletin fell out. From their church. The one they used to attend every Sunday before she got sick. Before everything fell apart. Sunday morning. Adrian stood in the closet for 20 minutes, trying to decide what to wear. Finally, he pulled on dark slacks and a white button-down. Simple. He walked down the hall and knocked softly on the girls' door. They were already awake, sitting on the floor with their dolls, silent as always. Would you like to go to church with me today? He asked. 3 pairs of green eyes turned toward him, wide with surprise. Arya nodded slowly. Belle and Nova followed. They got dressed without a word. And 40 minutes later, Adrian pulled into the parking lot of Grace Community Church. His hands were shaking on the steering wheel. They hadn't been here since Lena's funeral. The worship band was already playing when they walked in. Adrian led the girls to a pew near the back. The music swelled, voices lifting around them, singing a song he remembered from years ago. Great is thy faithfulness, O God, my Father. There is no shadow of turning with thee. His throat tightened. He tried to sing, but the words wouldn't come, and then the chorus hit. Morning by morning new mercies I see. All I have needed thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Adrian's knees buckled. He gripped the pew in front of him, his whole body shaking. People around him kept singing, but he couldn't. He just stood there, tears streaming down his face. 14 months of grief and guilt and anger pouring out of him in silent, wrenching sobs. Arya reached up and took his hand. Her small fingers wrapped around his, squeezing gently. He looked down at her, and she was crying too. So was Belle. So was Nova. They stood there together, broken and weeping, while the music washed over them. And for the first time since Lena died, Adrian prayed. Not the angry, desperate prayers he'd hurled at heaven in those first terrible weeks. A real prayer. From the deepest part of his soul. God, heal what I destroyed. Please. I can't do this alone. I need you. My daughters need you. Heal us. The week that followed was the hardest of Adrian's life. Harder than building his company from nothing. Harder than burying his wife. Because it required something he'd forgotten how to do. It required him to stop. To be still. To feel. Monday morning, he canceled all his meetings. Every single one. His executive team was stunned. Margaret looked at him like he'd grown a second head. But he didn't explain. He just walked into the kitchen where the girls were eating cereal in silence and sat down at the table with them. "Can I join you?" he asked. They looked at each other, uncertain, then nodded. Tuesday, he found Lena's old Bible storybook in the playroom, the one she used to read to them every night. He sat on the floor, his back against the toy chest, and opened it. "Would you like me to read to you?" Arya climbed into his lap without a word. Belle and Nova sat on either side of him. He read about Daniel in the lion's den, his voice breaking when he got to the part where God shut the mouths of the lions. Protection, deliverance, faithfulness. When he finished, Nova whispered, "Mommy liked that story." "I know," Adrian said, kissing the top of her head. She did. Wednesday, he sat on the floor of their playroom and just watched them. Didn't check his phone, didn't think about work. Just watched. They played quietly, carefully, glancing at him every few minutes like they were waiting for him to leave. But he didn't. He stayed. Thursday, Arya brought him a drawing. A house with 4 stick figures. "That's us," she said softly. "You, me, Belle, and Nova." "It's beautiful," Adrian said, his voice thick. "Can I keep it?" She nodded and climbed into his lap. They sat like that for an hour. Friday morning, Belle asked him a question. "Daddy, is God mad at us?" Adrian's heart broke. "No, sweetheart. God loves you so much, more than you can imagine." "Then why did he take Mommy?" she whispered. Adrian pulled her close. "I don't know, baby. But I know she's not hurting anymore. And I know she's with him. And I know she wants us to keep living. To keep loving each other." By Saturday, something had shifted. The girls were still quiet, still careful, but they weren't pulling away anymore. They were watching him, waiting, testing to see if he would stay. Sunday afternoon, exactly 1 week later, Soraya came back. Adrian had texted her that morning. She'd replied simply, "I'll be there at 2, he told the girls, and for the first time in days, their faces came alive. When the doorbell rang, they ran. Actually ran. Down the stairs, through the hallway, nearly knocking Adrian over. Wearing the same simple dress she'd worn the day he fired her, her eyes warm and full of grace. The girls didn't hesitate. They crashed into her, wrapping their arms around her waist, burying their faces in her dress, sobbing. "Miss Soraya, you came back. You came back." Soraya knelt down, gathering all 3 of them into her arms, tears streaming down her own face. "Of course I did, sweet ones. I promised, didn't I?" Adrian stood in the doorway, watching, his throat tight. This woman, this beautiful, faithful, humble woman had saved his family. Not because she wanted recognition or money or anything in return. Because God had sent her. And she'd listened. Over the following weeks, a new rhythm formed in the house. Soraya came every morning. But not as a maid. As a guide. A spiritual anchor. She prayed with the girls before breakfast. Read scripture with them in the garden. And slowly, patiently, she began teaching Adrian how to do the same. How to pray out loud without feeling self-conscious. How to answer their hard questions about death and heaven and why God allows pain. How to sit in silence without running. The girls started speaking more, in full sentences, then in paragraphs, then in laughter that echoed through the halls again. One evening, 3 months after Soraya had returned, Adrian was tucking the girls into bed when Arya touched his face. "Daddy," she whispered. "You came back." He didn't understand at first. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" You went away after Mommy died, she said. But now you're back. You're really here. Adrian's vision blurred. I'm here, baby. I'm not leaving again. I promise. That night, after the girls had fallen asleep, Adrian found himself in the kitchen. The same kitchen where he'd first seen Soraya with them, where the sunlight had poured through the windows and his world had shattered. He stood by the counter, staring out at the yard, and felt a presence. Not Lena, not Soraya. Something bigger, warmer, eternal. Thank you, he whispered into the quiet. Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for sending her. Thank you for healing us. The next morning, he woke to the sound of laughter. Real, unfiltered, joyful laughter. He walked downstairs and found all three girls in the kitchen with Soraya, making pancakes, singing. When they saw him, they ran over. Daddy, come help us. Nova grabbed his hand. They pulled him into the mess of flour and eggs and sticky counters. And as Adrian stood there, surrounded by his daughters, by Soraya's gentle presence, by the light streaming through the windows, he realized something. God had restored what grief tried to bury. His family. His faith. His heart. The house was breathing again. And so was he.